Pac-12 Today.
Quack, quack! Quack, quack!
Nix, snap, keeps, gonna score easily. Bo Nix faked the handoff to Dollars, went left, and there was nobody in the zip code.
You're listening to Pac-12 Today on Sirius XM Pac-12 Radio 373. Here's Sean O'Connell and Jeff Schwartz.
And Max Torres, publisher of DuckDigest.com, Fox Sports Eugene. Max, how are you?
I'm great. How we doing? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on after another big Oregon Ducks win. Let's start with Bo Nix. There was the tweet, I'm sure you saw it. Jeff had to edit this for everyone who follows nationally. The list of, the numbers for a bunch of Heisman Trophy considerates and frontrunners put out there. Bo Nix completely omitted, even though his numbers are better than the kind of usual cast of characters, Stroud and Young and all those guys. Why is this still happening, given the fact that, Bo Nix is a name people recognized even before the season started? Maybe not for the right reason, maybe not for this particular reason, but it's not like he's an unknown.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a question I bet a lot of Oregon fans are asking themselves, and maybe even fans nationally are kind of asking, as the season goes on. But every week, Bo Nix just shows up. This last game against Colorado was another stellar showing. But I think maybe part of the reason that it happened is maybe some people are still hung up on that Week 1 loss to Georgia, where, he really looked like his usual self at Auburn, but he's done everything he can to possibly, erase that. And I think the only other thing that maybe comes to mind about why this is happening is because Oregon's only played 2 ranked opponents so far, after the Georgia game, that is, and BYU and UCLA. So maybe some people are just waiting to see how he performs in this back half of the schedule, which is definitely shaping up to be a tough one for Oregon, but he's pressing all the right buttons and doing everything right in that Kenny Dillingham offense right now.
It did feel like they've been trying to get him a couple more stats each week. He stayed in kind of later against Cal, threw a long touchdown pass to Herbert. He really didn't run the ball at all in the first 45-ish minutes of that Colorado game, and then boom, he had a couple rushing touchdowns. Does it feel like they're making a conscious effort to kind of pad his stats?
I don't know if I would so much say that. I think one big difference that we've seen obviously this year is how willing they are to have Bo go under center and, do the QB sneak. And it feels like he has that QB sneak at the goal line down like Tom Brady right now. It's just been that effective. But I think a big part of it really comes down to a certain degree, handing the reins over to Bo and just letting him do what he wants, what feels most comfortable for him. And I think he's really found that balance of, when he can improvise and get out of the pocket. I know one of the touchdown runs he had against Colorado, it was just a split-second read. There was not even a shred of hesitation, and he just pulled that thing and then ran it in there completely untouched. So I don't know if I'd say they're consciously trying to, pad his stats, but really just trying to utilize the full extent of his skill set, and that's really showing up every week.
Is the Oregon offensive line getting the flowers it deserves, given all they've accomplished so far this year?
Yeah, I would say that they are. I think any football fan knows that it really starts up front. But with Oregon, I think it's going to be a little bit of a different consideration because Duck fans have gotten so used to the offensive line being so dominant, under Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal, and in previous years. But I think that they are getting their flowers. It's a talking point every week. Adrian Clem has done a phenomenal job since he came down from the NFL ranks in Pittsburgh, just really taking this group, which admittedly was very veteran-laden, but, the rotations, the younger guys that get in, it really feels like they don't lose a step, they don't miss a beat. And I think that there's no better, example of that than when Stephen Jones went out early in the season. Marcus Harper had to come in. He was a guy who was doing his time, waiting for his opportunity. It was over 1,000 days since he contributed in a game, and he was ready. And Josh Connerly came in as well, a true freshman who's burned his red shirt. He's playing every week. So I think they are getting their flowers, but they should definitely continue to get their flowers because they're going to be relied on very heavily in these next 2 games.
The wide receivers didn't get kind of a lot of work in this game, the wind, and just kind of, it wasn't quite there, but they still had fun on offense with the trick plays and with getting guys the ball. It feels like this was a showcase to recruits like, hey, if you come to Oregon, man, you're a middle linebacker, you're the quarterback, you're the freshman offensive tackle, we'll find a way to get you involved.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'd say it really extends even past this game. This game was probably the most creative that we've seen the whole season. But the big storyline for the Oregon offense has not only been Bo Nix, but it's fun to watch this offense again. There's explosive plays. There's Troy Franklin getting 50-plus yard catches against BYU. There's so much going on. Like, it feels like every play, the tight ends are involved again, something we haven't really seen in years aside from just blocking in the ground and pound game. Running backs were catching the ball out of the backfield. So I feel like it was a showcase game, but it's also a continuation of what we've seen the entire year. Kenny Dillingham is just going into his bag of tricks. And they even said, I think, in the post-game presser that I can't remember if it was Bo or if it was Dan, was saying that, they don't really feel like trick plays when you're executing them at such a consistent level in practice, something along those lines. So they're as confident as they've been all season, and it couldn't be coming at a better time.
How many times before now and the end of the season will Dan Lanning get asked about the Auburn job and any other openings that might happen?
I don't know. I mean, we're talking to him in a little over an hour tonight, so I'm sure somebody will ask him about it. Certainly an interesting deal, especially with Oregon having to. It just feels like they're constantly kind of in this coaching carousel to an extent, and Kenny Dillingham getting linked to Arizona State after Herm Edwards got fired. So I'm sure Oregon fans, aren't enjoying all the rumors and smoke around that, but. I would guess, he'll get asked maybe one time and just kind of try to shut it down and just kind of nip it in the bud a little bit. But you never know in today's day of coaching. But for me, it's hard to see him leaving after just one season. But, I mean, maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
I mean, as an Oregon fan, I would hate for that to happen as well. I mean, is Oregon going to perpetually be this school, right? I mean, I wish that we weren't, but they hire good coaches. They win a lot at Oregon, and then it's hard to compete and pay, $12 million a year if Auburn wants to pay Dan Lanning. Like, is Oregon going to be in this perpetual cycle because they hire good coaches? Like, there's no doubt about it. They win and they hire good coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they're necessarily perpetually going to be in it. It can kind of feel like that at times. Certainly, in the past 5 to 7 years, that's kind of been the case. But I think with Lanning's case, it's they have a little bit on their side as far as him being from William Jewell College, and he was saying that assuring people from the start. Those were questions that came up after Lanning got hired. He was kind of assuring them, I kind of see this for the long run. And unlike the Mario Cristobal situation, there's not necessarily an alma mater to draw him back. But at the end of the day, all you can do is hire the best coaches, possible given your situation. And Rob Mullins has done a tremendous job doing that. And then it's really on the head coach to build out a really good staff. So even though you never want your coaches to be, coming in and out at a high clip, I think that if Oregon can get some really solid coordinators, then I think you set yourself up for more long-term success, because then maybe you can turn to them and then say, hey, you're already on staff, you're familiar with how things work, you know how it went when we were winning a lot of games, that kind of a situation. I think that's a little bit more ideal if you have to go about replacing your coach. But in today's era of college football, it's far from a perfect science.
Max Torres, Oregon Insider, is our guest on Pac-12 Today. Washington or Utah? What's a more dangerous game for the Ducks?
Man, that's a really good question. I think gut reaction, I'm going to go ahead and say Utah, just because Utah has had Oregon's number for a little bit now over the past couple seasons. And I think that there's just so much on the line in that game, especially if Oregon's able to get this win over Washington. I just feel like there's a lot more consistency and continuity in that roster, and a lot of great playmakers. I think they're just a little bit more of a complete team right now than Washington. So I'm going to go ahead and say Utah. But, man, we know that rivalry games are always interesting, so wouldn't be surprised if that Washington game was an entertaining one for sure.
Aside from Bo Nix, who's Oregon's best football player right now?
Oh, man. I think aside from Bo Nix, I'm going to go with Bucky Irving. I think that his impact has been phenomenal on this Oregon team. I know we saw a little different look from the running backs against Cal when Cal was able to kind of slow down the run game a little bit, and Bucky was one of those guys that has really just made a really good impact through the air, on the ground. He even threw a touchdown pass to Bo Nix this past week, but I think that his impact is just really hard to overstate because we saw so much attrition from the running back room in one offseason, right? You saw Trey Benson go to Florida State. You saw C.J. Verdell move on. You saw Guy go to USC. So that was kind of a question mark, and it was never really in doubt that Oregon was going to have a good backfield, but I did not think it was going to be this effective this quickly. But he is just amazing out of the backfield. He's so quick. He's so agile. He has vision, which it feels like at times, C.J. Verdell maybe didn't have the best vision, and he also has that home run speed. He can catch the ball. He just does everything, and he is just an absolute stud. So I'm buying all the Bucky Irving stock you have to offer, and I think that he's the best player on this team right now, aside from Bo.
Before we let you go, the officiating, unfortunately, in this conference has been a topic for the last several weeks, and Jeff made a point earlier that when Oregon gets guys ejected for targeting penalties, you have to change the way that you practice tackling. You have to change the way that you evaluate it while you're on film. Is Oregon being more adversely affected by these weird tackling rules than anyone else in this conference?
Oh man, that's a tricky one because it does feel like every time it hits Oregon that it's at the worst possible time, or after review it's a little bit give or take could go either way, but I don't know. We got another one that we got to see what happens with Jamal Hill after he got ejected for targeting against Colorado. But it certainly feels like Oregon is in the headlines along those lines of targeting than just about any other team in the Pac-12. So I don't really know. It's an interesting kind of thing to track. But every week they talk about, or every time it happens rather, they talk about we got to try to teach tackling better, or just get in the right strike zone. So it's a tough thing that they got to figure out, but fortunately for Oregon, they do have some quality depth that I think is getting some good snaps, like Keith Brown in the last game for Jeff Bossa. So it's not a situation you want to find yourself in, but you do kind of get some guys that can step up and maybe get some good playing time that they could be turning to a little bit later down the line here.
Oregon right now, the highest-ranked team in the Pac-12 conference, closest to that line of demarcation in the college football playoff rankings. We'll see where the Ducks are when the new ones come out tomorrow. And Max Torres will be covering it all. Max,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate your time.
Absolutely, not a problem. Thanks you guys for having me on, and hope I can be back in the future.